March's community call for the Work+ Collective, where we are focusing on identifying and embedding the NACE career competencies in student employment. My name is Amanda Kennedy. I am the Associate Director of Work+ and Experiential Learning Initiatives here at Arizona State University. And I'm joined today by my colleague, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm also an Amanda. My name is Amanda Buckwitz, and I'm our program director for Work+ here at ASU. So I work very closely with Amanda Kennedy, and we're excited to bring you this special edition of the Amanda Show.
Yes, and in addition to our roles with Work+ at ASU, we also work with the Work+ Collective. So we're excited to have you all here with us today to talk a little bit about the NACE career competencies and where they kind of fit into the student employment experience, as well as how we can support you in embedding the competencies throughout the student employment experience. So today's agenda, we're going to start off with why career competencies matter. We'll do a brief overview of the NACE career competencies. We'll go through the student employment journey and point out where exactly the competencies fit in best throughout that student employment journey. We'll talk a little bit about embedding the competencies in job descriptions and supervisor training, aligning tasks and projects with career readiness. And then we'll also be sharing some tools and strategies that we have available to everyone through the Work+ Collective website. But in the Work+ Collective fashion, we recognize that we do not have everything figured out. We really emphasize collaboration. So this is also going to be an opportunity and a call for us to share best practices, ask questions of the group, share strategies around the NACE career competencies. What are you doing at your institutions to embed the competencies into the student employment experience? And I'll pass it over to Amanda B.
Thank you. So I always like to start a lot with how we ground our work and the why behind what we're doing. In the case of talking about competencies, I think a huge call out I want to make is that competencies are a shared language, and the importance of having a shared language with our students is just it's invaluable. And part of that too is, I think many of us are familiar with the terminology, creating that career ecosystem. So it's not only just the partners and the staff and the faculty that you have a part of it, but it's ensuring that you have a shared language. And a lot of that is so that we're united in how we speak with our students so that they can help tell their stories in the best way possible. Remembering that we have, as we state here, the working learner dilemma, which I think many of us can probably relate to, of just a lack of resources for your life. So we have time, money, and energy kind of highlighted here, really thinking about our students that are working on campus work for a paycheck. They need income to support themselves. They're also working 10, 15, 20 hours, sometimes more, because they have multiple jobs. They might work with you, and they might also work off campus in another position. On top of that, they're taking a full course load, in addition to just how do I manage all of that? So they're in courses, they're in the job, but what about everything outside of that? Their homework, anything that they're doing in terms of club involvement or engagement in the community, on top of making sure that they are doing all that they can to be competitive after graduation. And every student experiences this differently. So they're involved in different things, they work differently, their course load looks different, they're outside of courses, and their university life looks very different. But everyone kind of has those finite resources. And so when we talk about the NACE career competencies, or career competencies in general, whatever that you utilize, the importance of having that shared language makes it easier for everyone to be able to have that shared language of understanding of, I'm doing this work because I'm developing in this area. And so really that's how we approach the work here. And what we'll be talking about today is strengthening that ability for those through lines of that shared language. And again, we'll present this framework and examples that we know of, but really this is meant to be an invitation to have a discussion, because we want to hear best practices from everyone, that we can build kind of our own resource collection that we share. And so again, going back to that piece where a lot of our working learners sometimes experience these opportunity or skill gaps, that many of our students struggle in finding purposeful work, meaning that they graduate, they get a position that they're like, I don't know if this is a right fit for me. Or there's a huge, or there is also a huge issue with underemployment after graduation. And I think this is where career competencies also play a key role. So our students are not able to necessarily experience the world of work in a way that helps them understand world of work after graduation. That's where we're trying to position student employment more so that they can have those experiences while in college so that they know what's purposeful work to them. But then the underemployment issue was where a student graduates, they have a credential, they have a certain skill set, but they're not employed in a position that aligns with what they should be doing with that credential and that skill set. And it could be for a number of reasons. Many times we believe that it's truly an articulation gap. Of understanding students don't give themselves enough credit and they're not able to talk about themselves in a way that really exemplifies the experiences that they have. And so we talk about embedding these career competencies is because if we're able to push the competencies throughout that entire student employment journey, reinforce through our larger career ecosystems of these NACE career competencies, we're constantly reinforcing with our students that you are developing in these ways, and this is how you tell your story so that you're really competitive with employers after graduation. Because if a student becomes underemployed after graduation, they're very likely to stay underemployed. And so that's what that 73%, it's a very high number of 10 years after graduation, many students are still underemployed. It's really hard to get yourself out of that situation. And so coming back to our shared outcomes, again, this is really what we're pushing for through the work of transforming student employment is that increased career readiness. So this is our shared language amongst all of our collective members here is having that increased career readiness, which we like to define by the NACE career competencies. When we talk about what is career readiness, it's all of those competencies provided by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. The next piece is that enriched relationship between working learners and our supervisors. And then the next outcome, improved confidence of working learners in articulating transferable skills and connecting them to post-completion opportunities. And so I think we can see how competencies play a role in each of these outcomes where career readiness is really defined by those competencies. The enriched relationship, if we're speaking in the same language and using that same terminology, we know that can help improve relationships and the improved confidence. If students are able to name it and explain it, that means that they're able to have more confidence in articulating all of those things. And so just a refresher of what those NACE career competencies are. This is kind of our terminology that we utilize at ASU. So we know that many institutions will kind of take the competency and modify them for their own institutional context, which totally makes sense. So we stick to them almost fully, but there's some areas that we like to modify to fit kind of our own Arizona State University context that we exist in. Even some of our colleges, they'll actually add on, they'll highlight these competencies and they'll add on additional ones too. So we have an arts and design school that likes to add on certain pieces related to creativity or entrepreneurship, because that's really core to their own academic entity. But at our own institution level standing, these are the terms that we utilize. And we know across the board at institutions across the country that they kind of start with these and modify them to fit their curriculum or whatever initiatives that they might have going on there too. As well. So again, this is kind of bringing it to the core of when we think about the competencies. A lot of times the way I frame it with our supervisors and with our students too is that this is where you kind of bring your storytelling in. And I like to frame it too of, you can sit there and say you're a great leader and you've exercised leadership a lot, but it's not really telling you. You have what that means. You have to tell the story behind it. And so you gather all these experiences, which one with all of our groups, we're thinking about student employment, but how do we help a student employee or a working learner identify, I've demonstrated leadership by doing this thing. I've demonstrated it by doing this and by doing this. So when they talk about being a great leader, they have the real evidence and story behind it. And so really that's what we're looking at, is that this is kind of your overall chapters of your book, to tell the story of all the competencies that you have with that. So we put together kind of our own thinking to help us understand at ASU, how can we help not only us as Work+ at ASU and within the collective, but also our supervisors. How do we help them understand where can they embed competencies throughout? And so this has helped us think about, when we work with folks that all have a different way of operating in each of these areas, is that we're thinking through, what is your process for application? What is your process for interviewing? And where are competencies being talked about or brought up? Because again, going back to that larger career ecosystem. So when we're thinking through the application, the interview, the hire, there's still places that you can embed the competencies. So Amanda Kennedy is going to talk about job descriptions in a little bit. But the other piece too is, how do you help frame your interview questions even to help students tell the story behind the competencies? So sometimes it's as simple as, that that we have the tool, the STAR method, of where you talk about that situation, the task, the action, and the result of that's a pretty standard format for responding to an interview question. Are you setting up your interview questions to help guide a student to actually answer them? Because we're teaching them. This is our opportunity with them as a student employment to teach them how to be a great competitive applicant after graduation. Let's start now with guiding them through that process, and let's set them up for success. So even thinking about, if I'm asking about teamwork, or I want to dive into that, how do I set up my interview question to really get to the format that they should be answering in, and making sure that these are the competencies that I want them to be able to address in an interview. Through onboarding, thinking through of introducing them to those competencies. We have a number of resources available that help students understand and introduce the competencies to them in the context that they need it. And so what's difficult, I think, for all of our institutions, is that we have a wide diversity of positions for our students. We can't be experts in every single role on campus, and we don't ever oversee every role on campus. And so the approach that we've had is that we work with supervisors on helping them identify competencies in their own roles. And then how do we help students actually do self-identification in their roles as well? And so a lot of it is that we present behaviors or definitions of the competencies, but then also kind of turn the table around and have that student identify, where have you been developing your competencies? What are the stories behind that? When we talk about goal setting, it's really thinking through, where are areas that our students have been excelling in competencies and where they've been able to really exercise and develop them. But what are other areas that they maybe need more exposure to develop those competencies, or need to seek other experiences to develop them? I don't think it's everyone's in a position with their roles that you can say, I'm going to have my students develop all of the competencies to max levels in every single thing. That's not necessarily feasible for everyone, but it's really thinking about, how do you help your student identify those opportunities? Where can you assign additional tasks or projects to really help your student to get to that next level where it makes sense and where it's needed? And that's the same with professional development. So I talked about, if tasks don't align with competencies, where are there places that the student's able to seek out additional opportunities with support from their supervisor? So are there certain workshops happening, or panels, or is there research that the student can do on the clock to find those opportunities to do that? and then celebrating the next journey. So a lot of that is that key reflection component of, you've been talking about competencies a lot. What is that final kind of capstone experience where you can help your students really say, like, wow, I'm graduating, or I'm, moving on to this next position. I know sometimes it's sad for us when we have working learners that get a really great internship opportunity and they're not able to manage both, but we support them in that. And it's really, how do we make sure that they know that they're leaving with this excellent portfolio of competencies and have the stories for each of them? And so really thinking about, you don't stop growing or developing competencies, you just take them and keep going to another level with them.
So as outlined in that student employment journey, we have opportunity to embed the competencies as early as the job description. So from the time that students are applying and searching for jobs that they are interested in, we have the opportunity to embed those competencies into the job description, because just as much as we are looking for skills from students, if we want this to be a developmental experience for students, we should also be highlighting what can they expect to gain from this student employment position. So when you're thinking about job descriptions, aligning those with the competencies, what can students expect to gain or develop, and what specifically will they be participating in or supporting you with in this particular role, and how does that align with competencies? As early as the job description, it's going to allow students to start thinking about, how they want to, what they want to learn and what they want to gain from the student employment experience. And when we think about making student employment a benefit for students, when we want to position student employment as something that students should want to pursue versus maybe an off-campus job where they'll make a little bit more money, we have the opportunity here with as early as the job descriptions to talk about what are they going to be getting out of this experience. So highlighting those skills that they're going to develop, and it's going to help students start framing student employment as that learning experience. So possible job description, and we will also share some links at the end of today's call to some resources that we have on our website that have more examples of job descriptions, but list out all the things that you want students to be able to do in the position, what sort of skills you're looking for, but also add something in there that says, in this role, you will develop critical thinking, communication, and professionalism skills by gathering data on given topics, sharing your knowledge during team meetings, and completing projects in a timely manner. So not just listing out the competencies, but also making the connection between the specific work that they'll be doing in the role and how that aligns with the competencies that they'll be gaining. If you've been to any other Work+Collective Community Call or participated in any of our workshops, this quote might look familiar to you. Something that we have learned at ASU and that a lot of institutions that we have worked with have learned is that in order to enhance the student employment experience, it does sometimes start with the student employment supervisors. Because when we think about the student employment experience, who is going to be facilitating that experience? That is typically the student employment supervisors. So this is a quote that we always like to highlight from NASPA. It states that supervisors are the linchpin of the student employee experience. When we're thinking about supervisors in the context of the NACE career competencies or career competencies in general, many of us who are on this call today might be in a career services role or a career services adjacent position. Career competencies are sometimes a part of our day-to-day work. They're things that we are familiar with. But for student employment supervisors, competencies may be totally new to them. They don't realize that they exist. They don't realize how they are a part of the student employment experience and the opportunity that they have to develop those competencies and skills with their student employees. And so we have an opportunity to train and support those student employment supervisors, making them aware of the different resources that exist to support them in facilitating that experience, making them familiar with what are the competencies in general and how they can be more intentional about the student employment experience, and helping students develop those career readiness skills, engaging them in professional development, and focusing on that reflection piece, supporting them in understanding how the skills that they're developing are going to articulate to future job opportunities. This is also something that Amanda highlighted throughout the student employment journey when we think about aligning tasks with career readiness. And I also think this ties directly back to that articulation issue that we discussed in the beginning as well. Oftentimes students and even supervisors can view student employment as a merely transactional experience. They are just answering the phone, or they're grading assignments, or they're providing tutoring support. But there is opportunity to reflect on what they are doing, the tasks that they are engaging in, and how those align with the career competencies and how those align with their future career goals. In many cases, it's not quite as obvious to students how the tasks that they are participating in or supporting through student employment might relate to their career. Maybe it's not a direct comparison between, let's say, doing a customer service job when a student wants to eventually become an engineer or a doctor. But that's where we have the opportunity to work with students and helping them with that articulation piece and that reflection piece and that storytelling piece. How do we get students to see that these skills, these competencies that they are developing are going to be transferable to a variety of different careers and opportunities once they graduate? How do they talk about these experiences and make that connection? So just a couple of examples that we have highlighted today. So a research and teaching assistant. This is a student employment job that's going to be responsible for maybe data collection, literature reviews, grading, and teaching assistance in general. How do those align with the competencies? So critical thinking, they're going to be analyzing research findings and problem solving. A student comes to them with a question and the teacher or the professor is not there. They are the main point of contact. It's going to be up to that student to do some problem solving, to do some critical thinking, and make decisions to both support the professor and the student that they're working with. They're going to be developing that technology skill. So using research software or data management tools, they're going to be probably using, if there's an online course platform that you use here at ASU, we use Canvas. So they're probably going to be using Canvas a lot, possibly even supporting with the design of that online course. And then also they're going to be developing teamwork. So they're in this position going to be collaborating with faculty, other researchers. They're going to be collaborating with students. They're making a connection with their professor, someone that they can potentially use as a reference in the future, or get a letter of recommendation from. And hopefully they're in a field or supporting with a course that they have an interest in, so they can talk about that experience as it directly relates to their work and career interests. A customer service role. This is one that we hear a lot from supervisors at ASU and from institutions that we've worked with. I don't understand how answering phones or greeting visitors at the front desk is really going to relate to my future career. I'm just here to respond to emails or pick up the phone and answer questions. So yes, they do have to do those things. They are answering the phone, they are greeting visitors, they are providing information. But again, when we think about that articulation and that connection piece, let's talk about how you're developing communication skills. You're engaging with students, staff, and visitors professionally. So you are adjusting your communication style based off of who you're interacting with. I'm sure if you ask any student in these types of roles, if the way that they talk with their peers is the same way as how they talk with professional staff or university leadership, it's likely very different. And that's an important skill that they are developing and learning to hone in this type of position. Belonging and inclusion. So they're assisting diverse populations and ensuring accessibility. That's just an example of an experience that they might have in this particular role. And then professionalism, tying that back to communication. So they're managing their time effectively. If they're in a front office setting, they're likely dressing appropriately for a professional work environment. And again, they're communicating professionally. So how they're talking with professional staff and university leadership. Final example is that tutor or peer mentor. So in this particular role, a student might be leading student groups, conducting campus tours, mentoring new students, and providing tutoring. Again, this might seem like a very transactional position to students, but when we think about it with that reflection and that articulation piece, students are actually developing leadership. They're guiding and supporting their peers. They're being a good example. I'm sure in order to be a tutor, you likely have to have earned a certain grade in a particular class that you're providing support for, and they can provide that insight and leadership to students that they are working with. Again, teamwork. So they're coordinating with other mentors and staff. They're working with students, possibly supporting them in adjusting how they're providing their tutoring or how they are providing support to the student based off of students' learning styles. And then career and self-development, building coaching and facilitation skills, also ties back to that leadership competency. So students in these types of roles, they're providing coaching, they're providing feedback, they're facilitating an experience which is going to translate into many positions, especially if students want to be in a leadership role where they are supervising staff. Having that career and self-development and building those coaching skills is so important. So all of this to say, we don't want you to do this alone. We don't want you to have to start from scratch. The Work+ Collective is a repository of resources and tools that are designed to support institutions who want to make changes around their student employment experience, who want to enhance that student employment experience. And when it comes to the career competencies, there are several resources that are going to support that goal of embedding the competencies into the student employment experience. We're going to throw a couple of links into the chat, but I also want to highlight a few resources that are available, and I'm going to stop sharing and switch my screen.
Awesome.
All right. So one of our favorite resources that we highlight and that a lot of institutions have implemented into their work around student employment are the conversation cards. Are you able to see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. So these conversation cards are designed around the NACE career competencies. There are several cards per competency, and they are meant to serve as prompting questions to have intentional conversations with your working learners around the NACE career competencies. So again, when we go back to thinking of supervisors and them being the ones to facilitate that experience, if we want them to embed the competencies into the experience, this is a great tool for them to implement. They might not be career experts, but this is a good starting point. This is a tool that they can use to talk with their students about the NACE career competencies. I'm going to go ahead and open just so that you can see what that looks like. So here's an example of teamwork. Describe a recent team project or collaboration where you actively demonstrated your ability to listen carefully to others and understand their perspectives. How did your active listening contribute to the success of the project? And were there any challenges you encountered in practicing this skill? So when supervisors are having these conversations with working learners, this is an opportunity for working learners to reflect on their experiences and again, make a clear connection to a skill like teamwork. There are several questions, like I said, per competency. and there are questions for all 8 of the NACE career competencies. Something that we do at ASU is we have these printed out, and we will actually, in our one-on-ones with our working learners, we'll sometimes just grab one randomly from the stack and use that as a starting point or a theme to lead one-on-one conversations, or if we're having team meetings, to facilitate a topic or discussion topic for a team meeting. Another really great resource that we offer is best practices for job description posting. So again, going back to that slide I showed earlier in terms of aligning job descriptions with the skills that students will be gaining. So in addition to the skills that you're looking for from a student, what are some of the skills that they can expect to gain from a position? So we have a resource that is designed to help supervisors or any hiring managers design those job descriptions and make those connections between the competencies. We have resources from other institutions who are doing similar work. So this particular resource around facilitating discussion around the NACE career competencies, this was designed and shared with us from Northern Arizona University. So another great tool for you to use. This is going to have a question related to a particular competency, and it's a worksheet that will ask students to reflect on their experience and how it relates to that competency, an opportunity for supervisors to add any notes or action items or ideas that they have for working learners and students. We also have resources around interview-based, competency-based interview questions. So if a hiring manager wants to align their interviews with the NACE competencies that they have maybe highlighted in their job description that a student can expect to gain from the position, they can also use this question bank to help them ask questions related to the competencies in their interviews with students. Again, helping students frame the student employment experience as a learning opportunity, as a professional development opportunity. One other resource that I want to highlight is we also have something called the Working Learner Pathway. So this is actually an LMS course that we are happy to share with anyone who is interested in implementing this in their institution or using as a part of their student employment experience. But this is specifically geared towards working learners, towards student employees, designed for them to work on throughout their student employment experience. It focuses on the NACE career competencies, helping them become more familiar with what those are. It focuses on that reflection piece, and storytelling. So how are they talking about the experience that they are gaining through student employment, or just experience that they're gaining throughout their college career in general? And it also is going to walk them through leveling up. So what are some things that they can do to enhance some of the skills that they are developing or engage in more? So how are they articulating their competencies? Again, that storytelling component. What are the skills that they can work on developing on an ongoing basis? We use this LMS course through Canvas, but I believe it's downloadable, and we can share with anyone who is interested. If you use something different from Canvas, you can download it and use it in like Articulate or Blackboard. I don't know if Blackboard even still exists, but it's something that you can download and make unique to your institution and where it fits into the student employment experience best. Last thing I want to highlight, not necessarily a resource through the Work+ Collective, but something that I know we use here at Arizona State University and that other institutions are using. We partnered with Career Launch. This is not a free resource. I know some other institutions use a company called Suitable, but developing that career readiness inventory or that career readiness quiz of sorts that can be embedded into the student employment experience as well. With that, I do want to open it up for any questions, comments. Would love to hear if there are other things that you all are doing at your institutions around career competencies, embedding those into the student employment experience. If you're facing any challenges around embedding that, we want to use the rest of this time, again, for collaboration and discussion to talk about what each of us are doing and how we can support each other.
I'll share. Hi, everybody. I'm Becca Scott, and I'm at Virginia Tech. And we have embedded career competencies into our student employment on campus, into our on-campus internship program, as well as our off-campus co-op and internship program. But in addition to all the great ideas you shared, we're doing some of those. So thank you for sharing a lot of those resources. We're doing some, but I also got some great ideas. We also do supervisor evaluation forms based on the professional competencies, and we don't use NACEs. We have our own set that are very similar to NACEs, but very much in line, but they're not exactly the same. So we collect employer evaluations. So we have students rate themselves on the professional competencies at the beginning of their work experience, and then pre and post, and then we have
Becca, you froze.
Oh, am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay. Sorry. So we have, yeah, it says my connection's unstable. Sorry. So we have data on how the students are rating themselves, as well as how employers are rating them on these professional competencies. So we can kind of track over time how the students are rating themselves and how employers are, and it gives us some information on what are maybe some of the programming or workshops that we might want to do for students based on how they're scoring in the competency or how they're being rated or evaluated in the competencies. And then we also do a student award program at the end of the year where we have a set of awards that are called the Professional Edge Awards. And those are based on our professional competencies. So students get nominated by their supervisor or by somebody into each of those competencies. And then we give an award each year for each of those competencies to students. That's what we're doing.
I love that award idea. That's a great idea. Becca, I do have a question. So the evaluation that you're using, is that something you've developed internally with Virginia Tech, or are you using ed tech company to facilitate that?
Yes, we created our own many years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that we continue to use. We created a matrix when we first started. So we developed our competencies around the same time NACE was. That's why ours are different, because we were already working on that as NACE was. So we've had like we call them performance factors or behavior indicators that we had put into a matrix for each of our competencies. So really the assessment is students rating on some of those performance factors or behaviors that we just developed as we thought these are kind of baseline behaviors that we would see from somebody in each of these competency areas, and then the students rate themselves on those. So like, for example, under teamwork, there's about like either 4 or 5 kind of behaviors or performance indicators that the student rates themselves on. So they do that consistently. The employer evaluation is just on like the overall definition, and we ask them to kind of rate on the overall definition because we didn't want the employers. We were just afraid they wouldn't do it if it was that detailed. So the students actually rate themselves on these specific performance factors, and then they do give themselves an overall rating. So we are actually comparing the overall rating from the student and the employer, but it is a homemade assessment that we're currently using.
That's great. And then how are you using that data to, make changes or like implement the feedback that you're receiving from those evaluations? And what are you kind of offering to support the feedback that you're receiving from those evaluations?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we have a series of workshops that we offer each semester that we call skill shops. And they're based on the professional competencies. So it's some topics around any of the skill sets that would fall under the umbrella of those competencies. So this semester we did leadership, and there was a series of workshops we did on leadership because our results showed us that leadership was where employers like over the past year, that was our lowest scoring competency from employer evaluations. So we did a whole workshop series on leadership. And there was different things, like we talked about leadership style, we talked about like strengths in leadership. We have a leadership panel of young alumni talking about how they've used leadership like in their as a young professional in their like early career years. There was another topic I can't remember on leadership. I can't think of it right now. So we'll switch those up every semester, kind of based on like where do we think that either some of our how those competencies are being rated, or maybe we're getting feedback from some of our campus supervisors with like professionalism. One has been a huge one recently. We've done that a couple different times, touching on a lot of different issues around professionalism, because that's one that we're hearing a lot from our on-campus and off-campus supervisors for our students. Then I'm trying to think if there's, yeah, that's, and then we do some activities in our course. So if we see that one, because we teach an internship course also, and we have some activities for our on-campus supervisors can do with their students. We will do we call them the professional development activities. So sometimes we'll create one based on if we see that there's a particular issue going on with our student employees, so that either the supervisor can implement it or the student does it in our class.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I'm sure students and employers appreciate the fact that you are taking those evaluations and offering support or solutions that are focused around those challenging areas when it comes to those competencies.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything that they want to share, or any questions or challenges around the competencies? Again, open discussion. Feel free to come off of mute or throw anything into the chat. Never sure how long of silence I should allow before moving forward, but I will go ahead and share my screen one more time with everyone. Just want to provide an opportunity for us to continue to connect. So it doesn't sound like anyone else has any additional questions or best practices to share, but that might change. So you might not have anything to share right now, or you might want to take some time to think about some questions that you have. And so there's opportunity for us to continue to connect in a couple of different formats. So the Work+ Collective, the link and QR code are on the screen for you there. That is where you can find all of the resources that Amanda linked in the chat today and that I shared, as well as a ton of other ones that aren't necessarily related to the career competencies, but are geared towards professionals in higher education looking to improve that student employment experience. So there's a variety of different resources available for you to open access through our website. If you're ever interested in sharing resources that you all use or have implemented at your institution, please feel free to reach out to myself or Amanda directly, and we're happy to put those on our website and highlight the great things that you all are doing at your institutions. Another way to connect is through our LinkedIn community. So that's a great place to ask questions. If there are topics for future community calls that you would like the Work+ Collective to focus on, you can share those in the LinkedIn community. We will share videos from this community call and future community calls to the LinkedIn community as well. But it's a great space to connect with other higher education professionals who are doing similar work. But with that, I believe that's all we have for you today. Amanda, any last thoughts?
I gotta do a shameless plug. So we just announced that we host what we call the Work+Collective Institute, where if your institution is the place that they are thinking about, how do I really spur transformation in the space of student employment, the Institute experience is great for you. And so our team, if you apply and are accepted, we will be accepting applications through, I believe, April 21st is our deadline, where you can join a process that we help facilitate for you to look at what is your student employment experience, what are some of the main barriers that exist at your institution, and what are some, how can we start to really identify what that problem is. And so it's really helpful to kind of launch the movement and to start new initiatives at your own campuses. So I popped the link in there, but we'll be doing some information sessions too next week and the week after if you want to learn more, or just contact us and we'll be happy to chat.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and please connect with us if you have any questions, or if you, again, want to propose a topic for future calls. But appreciate you all taking time out of your day to be here with us, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.